Welcome back to another episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. I have the pleasure of talking to my friend Seth Breedlove from Small Town Monsters all about the 2022 Kickstarter that's in effect right now. So make sure you back that if you haven't gotten a chance to already. The link for that will be in the show notes of this episode. I talked to Seth all about the amazing content that's coming out this year. There's so much of it, and we talk about it in the main show, in the after show as well. You can catch that by subscribing to the Bigfoot Society Patreon. That's patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. But again, just sit back, relax as I talk to Seth Breedlove about the upcoming content for the 2022 year. All right, welcome back to the Bigfoot Society podcast. We got Mr. Seth Breedlove with us back again. Your hair's looking good, my dude. How's it going?
Great. It's going great.
Awesome.
Very sleepy. In all seriousness, yesterday I was up at 1 a.m. to start editing Instagram reels, because this is like,
okay, all right.
The behind the scenes of STM is like everyone does everything. So, like Heather and Courtney and Andy and Zach and Santino have been editing stuff for like over a week and putting together like our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram social media posts and all that kind of stuff. And I have to dive in and do that stuff as well. We're in the middle of editing. I'm in the middle of editing together episode 4 of the Bigfoot Project. So
nice.
As we prepare to launch this Kickstarter, where if it fails, we are going to go under. So it was a wild week. Every week, I forget. I was talking to Shannon earlier today, and she said she remembered like 5 years ago me being in the same sort of like absolute paranoid state all throughout the process leading up to the launch of the Kickstarter. So nothing has changed.
Well, the great news is that you had the Kickstarter launch last night and you blew it out of the water in 90 minutes. So
here's
congratulations.
All right. So here's some behind the scenes with this Kickstarter is if we put down what we actually needed to make the movies, it would have been 120. Wow. For us to run the production company we run, we legit need like a production company budget, and that is well beyond $60,000. 60 grand will get us to like the launching point that we need to be. But so I'm not downplaying the fact that we hit that number. I'm in absolute shock. I was talking to Mark Matsky like an hour ago about it, and I said I have never been stunned during an STM Kickstarter launch until now. Like, this is the point where I'm like floored by the response to it.
I mean, I was going to ask you, like, what was I was watching the live, and like, what was your response like when you're like, oh, we already have the same amount that we got last year, pretty much? Just like, boom, it happened.
That's what's wild. So the night before, because the week of a Kickstarter launch with STM, I don't sleep. I was up at 1 a.m. yesterday.
Oh man.
And started putting things together and like getting ready. So yeah, on February 4th, 2021, we would have been at 43,549 by midnight with 194 backers. And by the same time period last night, it was at 70 something. I actually don't know exactly what it was, but it was well beyond that. And at this point, on February 5th of last year, we were at 50,000 with 281 backers, and right now we're at like 400 and something, and it's almost doubled last year. So.
It's amazing. Let's pause for a quick second, and not we shouldn't assume that every listener knows who Seth Breedlove is, but maybe we should. But let's not assume. So in case you're listening to this and you're like, who's this Seth guy? Who's Small Town Monsters? I'm super confused right now. So here's a little bio so you can catch up and then you got some movie watching to do. So Seth Breedlove is an Ohio filmmaker best known for his production company, Small Town Monsters, which focuses on cryptids, monsters, legends, and the unknown throughout America. You may have heard him on his podcast, Monsteropolis, with his co-host, Mark Matsky. Small Town Monsters, I mean, it started out as a production company, Seth, but like it's a full-blown content-making machine, I would say. I mean, the stuff you guys are doing is intense.
Yeah. Yeah. In the last, so behind the scenes, STM has always been like a very large group of people like involved. That hasn't gone before the cameras until the last like year, 2 years maybe.
Yeah.
But I would say in the last years when it became obvious that like this is much more than Seth Breedlove. However, it has always been much more than Seth Breedlove. Like I've always said STM is far beyond me. But I would say at this point in time, especially with like YouTube and what we're doing with YouTube, it's pretty obvious. STM is me, and it's Heather Mosier, and it's Andy Matsky, and it's Mark Matsky, and it's Courtney, and it's Santino Vitale, and it's Zach Palmisano, and it's Jason Udis, and it's Adam Dugan, and it's basically anyone that's involved in STM I consider part of the family. And so for the last few years it's been growing, but this year it really like came into its own where I basically started taking the reins off and saying do what you want with whatever your like facet of STM is. Sure. So Andy has been here since early summer of last year. And at that time, I kind of like, we didn't know what to do with Andy because he's like 18, 19 years old. When he came on board,
he's a
kid. Wow. He's a kid. So like when he came on board, I just kind of told him to do what he wanted. And he kind of like found his own facet to Small Town Monsters and made it his own. And that happens to be like the podcasting side of things. So he's working on, so he films and edits Heather's show, The Lore You Know, and then he films and edits Monsteropolis. And like even the most recent episode was actually just him and his dad kind of chatting together. Yeah. And then we're bringing on a new show called The Weird Side of Normal with my buddy Adam. Yeah. And he'll run that. And Alex and Eli kind of do whatever they want with Beyond the Trail.
They do. And they're good at it, and they definitely do. Yeah.
Yeah. And about maybe like 2 months ago, I approached them and I was like, what do you think about trying to go like twice monthly with the show? Because they were already doing once a month episodes of Beyond the Trail, and they were like, well, as long as the money's there, we're in.
Right.
And so we made sure the money was there, and we basically bankroll them and make sure they can go where they want to go and make what they want to make and edit how they want to edit. And that's how that works. So
amazing.
There's a lot going on behind the scenes, but the ultimate goal is that STM will be a fully functioning, independent production company. That is we always have been. It's just that in terms of like people who are owning what they were doing, that hasn't always been a thing. STM has been very tied into like movie production for a very long time. And the fact is, like, film production's great. And it's very like quote unquote sexy. Like people think of like film production as, oh, you're like a film director and
look like Steven Spielberg or something.
No, that's like the romanticized version of like what a film producer is versus what it actually is. This is not in any way a sexy job. Like you come into work, and yesterday I started working at 1 a.m. and I finished around 10 p.m. last night. And that's that's not that abnormal, especially when you have companies like 1091 involved in your distribution, where they're kind of like dictating what your
It's
release
true.
schedules are and like
Yeah.
when you need to be putting stuff out. So I wouldn't do anything else, partially because I'm not capable of doing anything else. Like, I'm not an intelligent person, I'm not a smart person, I'm not a talented person. I can make movies, and that's like it. And so this is it for me. Like, if film production fell through, I would be hosed. I'd be going to like a factory job at night.
I get it, but what you are doing is extremely valuable. I think, especially in this time of the current, some people can't leave their house, and they need to experience, like, providing entertainment for people is a legitimate thing, like the world
Oh
needs
yeah,
that for sure,
no, I'm not. I wouldn't downplay what it is we do.
Yeah.
What I would say is that everyone has a God, this is going to go off down like a tangent, but like, everyone has a path they're supposed to be on in life, and this is not
Yeah,
fueled.
let's go
This
for it,
is
man.
this is not fueled by my current state, but
Okay.
everyone has a path they're supposed to be on in life, and it can take a while for you to find that path. So like, I did medical
Okay.
billing for like 10 years or whatever,
Oh
and
yeah.
before that I
Yeah.
did home repossession and landscaping and all that kind
Oh,
of
I
stuff.
didn't know that. Wow.
It took a long time for me to get to the point where I found filmmaking. And at this point in my life, there is nothing else I would be any good at doing. And so like, you find your thing, and once you find that thing, you better darn well invest yourself in it to every extent, every fiber of your being, because if you don't, that thing's going to slip through your fingers,
That's true. Yep.
and you'll be back to doing whatever it is you hated doing beforehand. So STM is end of the day, it's a family business. It is a very small
That's
production
cool.
company, and it's run by multiple people. Behind the scenes, it is like, one of my favorite things about watching STM over the last few months is seeing like Heather Heather and Andy and all the, like, Zach, kind of like own their different roles within the company, and like start trying to like, what can we do to make this work? Like, what can we do to push the Kickstarter? And I don't know, we talk about it like it's a family, and people think that's like a goofy like branding thing, but it really isn't. Like, behind the scenes, like, what goes on here at the offices is far beyond just like, let's make movies together. We're here together when family members die. That has been a thing this year.
Yeah.
When we are dealing with serious life problems, like, we're together. And it's unlike any job I've ever had or been a part of. And I mean, obviously some of that is going to be the fact that I'm the guy that's kind of like steering the ship, but I never think of it that way. Like, STM functions in a weird way. It functions with or without me. Like, I'm sure if I wasn't here, it would be
it could keep going.
Yeah.
In a way, which is weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if I wasn't here tomorrow, Heather and Andy and Courtney and Zach and Alex and Eli and Mark, they would find a way to keep it running whether I was here or not. So I'm happy about that. It's a legacy. What I keep saying is, it's a legacy business. Like, my ultimate goal is that it's here for Tommy, my son, when he gets older. But I think beyond that, like, it's going to be here for all the people who are a part of it right now. Like, it's a legacy business for the people that are involved in it right this minute.
Do you ever think, or do you ever kind of stop and look at the whole STM, the whole last year's, what you've made, and think like, okay, kids growing up right now of a certain age, like, STM documentaries are their In Search of Bigfoot, or their this generation's Monster Quest, or Finding Bigfoot. Do you ever think like that? Or like, I could see how this could be the type of things that are turning the current generation onto cryptozoology.
No,
Personally.
we've met kids who told us that.
Oh wow.
Adam Dugan and I were at an event in Kentucky back in October, and this kid came
Yeah.
up to our table and said he was a huge Momo fan.
Oh yeah,
That was like
dude.
what got him
Totally.
into
Wow.
cryptids, and wanted a picture with us. And like it was this whole thing where he was talking to us about how that was like his introduction to the subject. So it's definitely a
That's
thing.
awesome.
End of the day, we don't think about that stuff until way later.
Right.
Mostly we're just trying to not go under on a day-to-day basis and
Well, that's, you know, and
keep ourselves afloat.
that's part of, so I'm looking at it from outside the company, and I'm like, oh, you're just making movies. But like, when you have a business and like, or like running a podcast, like you are just, you're trying to keep the business going as well. So like, that might sound like a super like downer type statement, like we're just trying to keep the business going. But like, at the end of any day, any content creator just is trying to keep their stuff going as well, which is, I'm going to segue into this. It's important, if you like the stuff that you consume, holy mackerel, to support it. Which is why Small Town Monsters Squad is amazing. And
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the 4K stuff, as I always tweet and
Yeah. No, I mean,
but
our channel content and member content is evolving too, because we're trying to, I don't know, we're trying to figure out how to work that and how it works. Because like over the last year, we've gone through a lot of changes behind the scenes. I mean, we went from when Squad started, it was all managed by Aaron, and Aaron isn't a part of STM anymore. Like he moves on to other things, and that's like,
okay,
as a business, that's how things go.
sure.
And it is behind the scenes, it is not the it probably seems much more like focused, or like we know what we're doing. But like on a day-to-day basis, like we're figuring it out as we go, especially with like the YouTube content. It's been, we put stuff out like Paranormal Unexplained, and then we figure out if there's an audience for it, and we let it
Exactly.
run its course and see if
Yep.
an audience wants it or not. And if it, we loved, like, Paranormal Unexplained is a thing that we loved, like genuinely behind the scenes, we really all loved that show. But there was not an audience that was demanding the show, and we were putting together a very work focused, intensive show that took a ton of time and effort on the part of like Aaron and Santino to put that show together, and then Heather and Andy and Courtney to be a part of it. It was a huge group of people that were involved in that show, and they were spending hours of multiple days per week putting the show together that had a viewing audience of like 4,000 people. And
Sure.
and you're like, okay, well, the audience isn't there for it, but the audience is there for stuff like Bigfoot Project and Beyond the Trail.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The numbers are intense. If you look on YouTube, like it's crazy. The numbers
like
that are
Beyond the Trail has gone from, the first episode of Beyond the Trail is approaching like 600,000 views or something, like it's over 500,000. But between that and then Bigfoot Project, we never knew what to expect with Bigfoot Project, because like I'm in the middle of editing episode 4 myself right now.
Okay.
And episode 4 is a very like, I mean, it's a boring episode. Like nothing happened. Like we were out in the woods, and there was like one wood knock, and we got it on camera. So that'll be in the episode. But like the episode is about what it's actually like to be out in the woods looking for Bigfoot, and how most of the time you're in that situation looking for something that most people don't think exists, and nothing actually happens. And like, how do you keep yourself motivated and interested and involved in looking for a evidence of something that doesn't actually want to be found? and that's what episode 4 is all about. That's what I'm struggling with right now, is like our YouTube audience. They want all that like evidence stuff. Like, give us all the evidence. We want like wood knocks and screams and rock throws and all that kind of stuff. And we've done all that. But the fact is, like, if you're out in the same location repeatedly, like over the course of like a year, which is our plan, like that's not always going to happen.
They might get used to your presence, is what you're saying. Stuff like
that.
Yeah.
Well, and like right now with the leaf canopy being down, I just don't think they're in there. Like, I think I think they retreat further into the more like rural areas outside of town. So like we're filming in there and we're going, so we filmed this episode. Episode 4 is Alex and myself in Minerva. And we set up like this faux camp and like a campfire, and we're down in the woods, and we have Alex in like a tree stand, and like it seems like it would be the perfect situation for something to happen. And like, nothing happens. Like, and that's what it's like looking for Bigfoot. Like, you go into Minerva, most of my time there isn't spent with actual activity taking place. It's it's doing all the boring kind of stuff that comes with going into an active like research area. And I want our audience to understand that. So episode 4 will be I think that'll be the make or break episode for Bigfoot Project, because it's the one where I'm kind of like, you know what? Honestly, I don't care right now if this thing makes a few $1,000s or not. Like, I want our audience to understand every episode isn't going to be episode 1 where we had, like tree knocks and crazy footfalls and all that kind of stuff. Most of the time when we're out there, it's sitting there waiting for something to happen, nothing happening. And it also, like, it's a dangerous location. Like,
okay, tell me how it's dangerous. That's really curious to me.
Like, I don't think people get that about, because they think Ohio, you don't think, okay, there's, like it's farmers' fields. What's the problem there? Les Odell was in there with us for 2 days, got this tick on his back that he ended up having to take pills and all this kind of stuff for it. I had to go to the doctor for it. In episode 4, I was out in the woods right behind the cabin, like 20 yards from the cabin, taking a leak behind the outhouse, because you don't use the outhouse, because the door of the outhouse has been chewed off by raccoons, and the raccoons have been
classic.
Yeah, they've gone into the toilet, and they've drugged the remnants of the toilet out of the. Anyway, you don't want to go in the outhouse. So
I was do an episode on the outhouse, dude. That would be that's a no-go. Yeah. Okay,
you don't want to do that. I had an episode with Tommy in the outhouse there. That was not a good. Yeah, it was not a great time.
Yeah. No,
but I was in episode 4, like I was out behind the outhouse taking a leak, and I didn't hear anything. I just happened to glance up, and I saw 4 huge coyote, broad daylight, middle of the day, running maybe 30 yards from me, maybe closer, along the side of the hill toward me. Behind 20 yards from the cabin. I took off. I like turned around, sprinted back toward the cabin because Tommy was there. Alex was there. I wasn't positive Tommy was up at the cabin, so I was concerned. It's not a super safe environment sometimes.
See, you don't get a lot of that from, like, there's definitely not all of that in the episode. This is very interesting how dangerous it is. Did the coyote thing happen? Was that around the same time where like Alex was treed in the tree stand?
That was back in that was another time. That was back in September. No, this would have been this was in November, right before CryptidCon.
Okay.
In fact, like Alex left Minerva and went to Kentucky for CryptidCon. So like this is that weekend before CryptidCon. I wouldn't say it's not danger. It's Ohio, right? So there aren't like it's not like you've got venomous snakes or stuff like that.
That's true.
It's not a place you don't want to take it lightly.
Exactly.
I grew up in the woods in Ohio. My parents' house, the house I grew up in, sat like my I don't know if I've talked about this with you, but like my family's house, the house I grew up in, it sat in a neighborhood, right? It's like a totally normal, like Simpsons looking neighborhood. Like as
Okay.
a kid, we always joked around that we lived in Springfield. And but behind the house was a forest, and then beyond that forest was a field, and then beyond the field was the Tuscarawas River, and then beyond that was forest all the way to Salt Fork. And so as a kid, like I grew up playing in those woods, and we go in the forest at 10 a.m. and we were in there until 9 at night every day, regardless of the season. And you don't necessarily mess around in playing around in the woods until all hours of the morning. And even in Ohio, like it's not a thing you do. But out there in Minerva, there's a different vibe, and the coyote and that kind of stuff. That's not something I grew up around, even though Bolivar's only like 20 minutes removed from where this cabin is.
That's crazy.
The town I grew up is 20 minutes away from Minerva, but I did not grow up familiar with, coyote and all manner of large animals.
It's a whole different world, it sounds like, and it's only 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit. So a lot of people listening are probably like, let's talk about the new stuff coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Seth, what is your top thing you are looking forward to coming out this year?
Well, it's Last Frontier, just because
okay.
I've always wanted to go on the trail of Bigfoot, the Last Frontier. I've always wanted to go to Alaska. My mom is currently like battling cancer, and it's terminal, and it will take her out. And as a kid, I was homeschooled because my parents owned their own business, and we did a ton of travel as a family. My life as it stands now it's not really different from how I grew up. Like I travel a lot, and I spend an inordinate amount of time around a lot of people in enclosed spaces, small spaces, and that's pretty common with like how I grew up. I grew up in a family of 6, and we traveled in a pop-up camper for 5 months out of the year. Okay. So like this kind of like living. This isn't weird for me. Alaska as a kid was where I always wanted to go. And so I did book projects on Alaska and all that kind of stuff. It had nothing to do with Bigfoot. But, I think by the time we go film on the trail of Bigfoot, the Last Frontier, it will be much more real to me. Like, always wanting to go. It's like a bucket list kind of thing for me.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think like just on a personal level, it'll have a huge impact. I would say beyond that, American Werewolves is really exciting.
I'm excited for that myself. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think people know what they're in for with it, but it's kind of like an about face from where we are now as a company back to the earliest days of STM.
Oh, really? Interesting.
With with like stuff like Beast of Whitehall and Boggy Creek Monster, where it's very much like witness story focused, but without the recreations. And we're going back to that like earliest days of STM roots, without the sort of like us as the storytellers mode that like On the Trail of has. The other thing about it, I've been rewatching Twin Peaks.
Okay.
And so
man.
So it has a strong Twin Peaks vibe. And actually, like I messaged Brandon today, and I was like, hey dude, I hope you're cool with like synths, because I need that, like I really need that. Yeah, I really need that like Twin Peaks kind of like 80s synth vibe brought into it. So I'm really excited for Twin Peaks. I am. I'm really excited for American Werewolves, but I'm most excited to make Last Frontier.
Because you were like, you actually went down to Land Between the Lakes area, Kentucky for because you just shot.
So yeah, we were there like a week ago, and I think people think we're making some sort of like movie about Land Between the Lakes. That's not, especially like the massacre story. When people hear Land Between the Lakes, they think of this like this goofy massacre story that I don't think there's any reality to.
Okay,
sorry, but no, that's really not what we were there for. We were there interviewing actual witnesses who have real stories, as opposed to just like secondhand, third-hand kind of stuff. And again, like I can't stress enough, like the work that Heather does. This is all because of Heather. Like these stories and stuff that she puts together. Like that's all Heather. So we interviewed 3 witnesses down there. All 3 of their stories are really like aggressive, intense kind of encounters.
Wow.
Two of them are by far the most aggressive, intense encounters we've ever interviewed people about for an STM movie. So I'm excited about that. But it is not the classic kind of Land Between the Lakes massacre story. That's not what we're doing right now. And that isn't to say that we wouldn't go do a movie about that at some point. But I think you'll see this American Werewolves could become a series of its own because it's very driven by it's very driven by the witnesses that we're interviewing and what they want to talk about and like how they want to steer the story. It is not, there's no pre-planned sort of like, we go into it with an idea of what we're going to do, but it's the witnesses that are steering the direction of the story, especially with you know, people hear Land Between the Lakes and they think massacre, and that's not where this is going. But, I mean, dude, one of the stories like involves a law enforcement officer who got involved in a standoff between like Bigfoots and dogmen.
Shut the heck up! Are you kidding
I mean,
me?
it's like wild,
amazing.
Yeah, it's like wild kind of stories, but coming from really believable witnesses.
Yeah,
so
dude, I'm hyped for that.
So we're really excited about that one, and yeah, I would say Last Frontier. Last Frontier is exciting too because it's gonna once again take Alex and Eli with us on a shoot, and they're gonna be doing Beyond the Trail while we're doing On the Trail of, and they'll intertwine like we did with Olympic Bigfoot.
Which I loved how you guys did that with Olympic Bigfoot. I'm excited for the Alaska shoot as well because everyone right now is like they watched through Alaska Killer Bigfoot on Discovery Plus, and to get STM to go up there and say, hey, here's maybe another look at Alaska Bigfoot things. And that it's going to be stellar. I'm excited for that. For sure.
Yeah, no, I and we're going to integrate that into the Kickstarter campaign in some interesting ways once we get to like the third stretch goal.
Oh, nice.
But I can't talk too much about that yet. We're going to make it a stretch goal. Look, third stretch goal, it's going to involve Beyond the Trail and On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Last Frontier.
I love it.
And on DVD and Blu-ray. So that's all I'll say.
That's amazing. And you might even already be there by the time this episode releases.
There you go.
To be honest. So
yeah.
I'm excited as well. Like I was going back and I listened to the video you guys did in September of last year when you actually announced all the different productions coming out, and like the different Beyond the Trails, it's pretty intense. Like I don't know if that has changed at all, but you guys are talking about like Ape Canyon and Oklahoma and West Virginia, Kentucky, Vermont. Like I'm psyched.
The thing that's changed, the only thing that's changed that I'm aware of is that Bigfoot Project might intrude into that to some extent because Bigfoot Project is going to move outside of Minerva. my goal with Bigfoot Project has always been to make it my Beyond the Trail, I guess, like my thing where I can go
sure.
to other locations and explore and do my take on that kind of stuff. So I think going forward we're gonna do some Bigfoot Project / Beyond the Trail tie-ins where they'll tie into each other. I mean, this year is going to get crazy because we have Bigfoot Project. We've got 2 episodes of Beyond the Trail that'll start coming out per month.
Okay.
And then beyond that, we'll have On the Trail of Bigfoot, the Ridge, or Bigfoot: the Ridge.
Excited for that. Yeah.
We start filming that next week.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So that'll start being a part of what we're doing with YouTube as well. So I don't know, dude. Like, if you think about it, people rely so much on network television for their Bigfoot content, especially like the older generation.
But no, that's true.
Like, we don't have to do that. Like, there's no reason for us to do that. If we have the means to do what we want to do with this kind of stuff, I think STM is the group to make it happen in a way that appeals to everyone, and we can do what you actually want to do with this content. I don't know how to put it.
I will say to anyone's face and any network's face that the Bigfoot content you guys are putting out is 1,000 times better than anything on any network channel.
Well,
insane.
Normally I would say, like the audience would disagree, but On the Trail of Bigfoot, the Discovery just destroyed every other documentary in its path for 3 months on Amazon. So like, it just dropped off the top 100 documentary lists about a week ago. On the Trail of Bigfoot, the Discovery, Beyond the Trail, the Bigfoot Project, and I mean, even some of the older stuff we're doing, like Minerva Monsters, still finding an audience, which is kind of wild. I don't think there's a reason anymore to go to network television for the Bigfoot content you're looking for. For one thing, like, a lot of it is very driven by like, I don't know. This gets weird because, like, I know people who are involved in this stuff, but like,
here we go.
It gets into areas where that kind of content is very driven by results. Like, networks want that stuff, and they don't give a crap about, like, let's just fake it. Like, if we need to fake it, let's just fake it. And
sure. Yeah. Like Finding Bigfoot stories, how the network wanted to supposedly fake Bigfoot, and Cliff was like, not a chance,
Yeah, that's not an exaggeration. Speaking of Cliff will be in Minerva with me for the May episode of Bigfoot Project.
So exciting.
He's gonna come stay out at the cabin with me for like 2 or 3 days. So we have that all planned out already, and he's got his plane ticket and everything. So
could there be a Moth Boys episode, please?
There's a Moth Boys episode that's happening. I wanted to get them. So those dudes have, I don't know that they've ever stayed out in that cabin is essentially like a wood tent. Okay. Right? Like, the reason I haven't taken Tommy out there lately is the last time we stayed out there at night, I was waking up with rats in our bed. So we've stopped stopped going out there. We've stopped going out there quite as much. The last time we went out there, we took our dog, my mini schnauzer, and she ate rat poison, which we didn't realize was in the cabin. We had to induce vomiting. It was this whole disaster.
That's so shivers.
But it is, it's not a it's not like I don't know, it's tough to say. It is the most peaceful it's the most like peaceful like relaxing place to be while
Sure.
simultaneously being disgusting and like just not fun to be there at times. It's a weird environment there in Minerva. But I do want to get the Moth Boys out there because I want to see how they'll handle like sleeping in a freaking cold or boiling hot cabin for a night in the middle of winter. I actually today I was supposed to be out there, but the roads here are so
sure, yeah,
you guys snow blown. It's bad news. Yeah.
I was like the only place in the US that isn't getting a terrible ice storm, which is like it's usually backwards. But in our last few minutes, what was it like seeing the Bigfoot during the Bigfoot Project? That must have been a just intense. Or I guess that could be other things.
I'm not downplaying it, but it wasn't. Like
okay.
The night before was intense. The stuff you see in that first episode where Heather and I were out in the woods and it seemed like they legitimately surrounded us. Like that was
wild.
That was I don't have an explanation for that, and I don't understand exactly what was going on. The weirdest thing about that episode is something that isn't even in the episode, which is that one of those things came up behind the cabin. Heather's husband Corey was back at the cabin on the porch. The kids were in the cabin watching the iPad.
Yeah,
and they were in what would be the like sleeping area of the cabin. It was my son and one of Heather's daughters, and then one of her son. And they were watching the iPad on the bed, and apparently, like Corey said, something walked right up behind the cabin.
Ugh! Wow.
To the window.
Whoa!
And he had to like scare the thing away. My sighting was so quick and abbreviated that my reaction to it, and I think I've been as transparent as I can be with how that transpired. If you watch the episode and you see the way I react to it, and then you see the way I'm talking about it in the next episode with Ed Balint from the Canton Repository and all that kind of stuff, that all that plays out exactly how it played out in real life. Like that is how I feel about the situation. Is like, look, we were driving by this clearing at 20 miles an hour. I saw this hairy upright creature running for like less than 2 seconds.
It's crazy.
I don't know the exact runtime that it was moving. I saw it like with my own eyes. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was doing there. I know it wasn't a person. And I know it was really friggin' fast. I know they're there. I don't understand. I don't understand how they're there. To me, it's not a lot of woods. If you look at the area, the people I've taken in there, when we look at satellite maps, it's like this is not a ton of forest. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know where they're hiding. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know where they go. Like the leaf canopy's down right now, but we're still getting occasional wood knocks and sounds. They're there. They keep their distance though. The difference between the interaction or the experiences we were having in September when the leaves are on the trees versus now when the leaves are off the trees, it's really dramatic, the difference. You go in there now and we'll have distant tree knocks, maybe even vocalizations right now are actually kind of common. Like we're getting distant calls and things like that. But we don't have what we had in September. Dude, I'm not kidding. I've been in in the Ouachitas. I've been in the Olympic Peninsula. I've been in the Adirondacks. I've been in the Falk River bottom. Like I've been in all these places where Bigfoot is supposed to exist. I've never heard, I've never experienced the kind of stuff we experience in Minerva back in September ever. Like it doesn't.
That's so crazy.
Like
yeah,
just the level of activity, the wood knocks, the sounds we would hear. They didn't care if you knew they were there. They didn't want you to see them, but they didn't care if you knew they were 20 feet away from you. You'd hear them running, footfalls. There was a night, this isn't in an episode, but there was a night we were out at the cabin just hanging out, eating pizza.
Yep.
And you heard clear as day running, 2 feet running down the road toward the cabin. And you heard it coming toward the cabin down the road. Oh, yeah. Like you could hear it coming. And I said to Heather, "Are you hearing this?" And she said, "Yeah." And I got the cabin out and I started filming, or I got the camera out and I started filming. Nothing ever happened. It never got close to the cabin. That night, that was the only activity we had. But it was clear as day, 2 feet running down the road toward the cabin.
That's amazing.
And it's it is a wildly active place where right now it's not active, but back in September, I've never experienced anything like that. I hope it wasn't like a one-time thing. Like
the thing I love about the Bigfoot Project is it's like a wide view of one location, and you never know. One episode could be like totally just chock full of Bigfoot evidence, and the next one, like, the place is not going to be nuts all the time, and it's like a extended view at one location, which I love. That it makes for a enjoyable time to watch. Believe it or not, it is getting close to the end of our hour together, Seth. It's fun to have you on. Everyone listening, if you haven't yet, and I'll have the links in the show notes, definitely go over to the Small Town Monsters Kickstarter. There's even more amazing rewards this year. We've got an enamel pin, a shirt, and a hoodie by Jonathan Dodd, all sorts of other stuff too. You can get your film in the credits, or your name in the film credits. So definitely sign up there. Also check out, if you go to, I'm literally plugging your stuff for you, Seth. That's how much I love it. I'm not even kidding. If you go to the YouTube channel for your Small Town Monsters, join the channel. You can get all the like awesome 4K stuff, which I love. But what else? How else can people follow you guys at Small Town Monsters besides that, Seth?
The newsletter. We have a newsletter that comes out regularly. So if you go on the website, you can sign up for that. Okay. And those are coming out like once or twice a week, and those will keep you like probably much more up to date than our other stuff. There's going to be a ton of travel this year, and we are doing events. So like, I know I'm going to be at the there's a Louisiana Bigfoot Film Festival.
Oh, really? Wow.
That I've been invited to be a part of. Okay. And that's actually coming up next month. So I'm going to be down there screening Howl of the Rougarou in Shreveport.
Skinwalker
really
colon.
Excited about. Skinwalker colon Howl of the Rougarou.
I've always wanted to say that.
Yeah. And we're going to do a Skinwalker colon. We're doing another Skinwalker colon something or other movie. Probably in 2023. So there's more planned for Skinwalker colon.
Skinwalker colon Ranch Adventures.
Yeah, there's more coming.
See what I did there? Yeah.
So there's a lot, dude. Like,
wow.
We're pulling back on the number of events we do. So, that Shreveport thing is one of our events. Mothman Festival. What else?
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Cryptid Con, you guys are going to be at, right?
Cryptid Con, we plan to have a big presence there. Cryptid Bash, the
I want to go to that event. So bad. I want to
go in Morgantown. We're going to be there. Wild and Weird, West Virginia.
Oh, cool.
We're going to be there.
Okay.
I think that's it. Like,
nice.
We're pulling back on the number of events we're doing, but we're we're making up for it, hopefully, in the amount of content we're putting out. There's just a constant stream of stuff coming out from us. So.
Fantastic. Oh man, Seth, thank you again so much for coming on. You're going to be hanging out for a little bit longer. We're going to see, got some extra questions for you. And we may have some Patreon members come in and hang out with us, ask them questions, but it'll be an extra interview. If you want to hear that, you can join the Bigfoot Society Patreon, which is patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. Helps us keep the lights on at the podcast. But thanks so much for coming on, Seth.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for listening to the Bigfoot Society podcast. Please take a few minutes to review the show on iTunes, 5 stars, as it does help us get into the eyes and ears of more listeners on iTunes. That will help us just get bigger and bigger and get even better quality guests for future shows. Also, if you have any Bigfoot encounters or cryptid encounters, please send your stories and audio and photos, whatever you've got, over to bigfootsociety@gmail.com. If you'd like to become more involved with Bigfoot Society and get some extra content, we do have a Patreon where you can get all sorts of cool things. For example, for $7 a month, you get extra Bigfoot Society content, usually interviews, but other things as well. You get a sweet membership card and a vinyl sticker that I send to you in the mail. You get access to the Bigfoot Society after show, which is an extra interview after the main interview with the weekly guest, and usually they are up for Patreon members to be in that extra show segment with them and me, and you get to ask your question live to them and get an answer from the guest, which, as you've seen what guest we've had in the past, this could be a really big deal. There's also a private Discord where you can get involved with talking to me one-on-one and the community there, and that's always a great time. You can find the Patreon at www.patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. We're very thankful for all our supporters that we have in so many different ways, and appreciate all our listeners coming back week after week to listen to more cryptozoology-based interviews. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. The views and opinions expressed are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Bigfoot Society. Any content provided by our guests are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone. Thank you.